And welcome again to our special series on Parsha, but Parsha with a focus on the story of Passover, all the details of Passover. And we've had a couple of recordings here. We're going into more of the details. So instead of a short class on the Parsha, this kind of tends to, I get long-winded. And one of the reasons they get long-winded is we talk about at Passover in the Haggadah, we talk about, you know, all those who if you really appreciate the story, you tell more about it, right? If you really are grateful for the miracles that God did for us, get into more and more of the details. And so that's what we're doing here with this special Parsha class, is getting into more of the details of the Passover story. So we're up to the Beshalach. Beshalach is really this is covering now covered the plagues, and we covered the last plagues, the last three plagues, and now we're talking about, Pharaoh has said, "Go, get out. We want you out of here." And in the middle of the night, he's trying to chase us out. And of course, we've said we'll go in the morning. We're not running around at night like escaping. We're going to go in broad daylight. And so in the morning, we're ready to leave. We've been prepared. We've done the Passover sacrifice. We've done circumcision. We've done all the things to merit the Exodus, and we're on our way out. Comes morning, Pharaoh himself is so anxious to escort us out, because the last plague is a plague of the death of the firstborn, and Pharaoh is a firstborn, so he's definitely concerned about this, and so he personally is escorting us out of Mitzrayim, anxious to have us leave. We're leaving with our young and with our old, our women, our children, our cattle, everything going together. As we were leaving, even the guard dogs that used to chase after us, they were silenced when wagging their tails. It was a miraculous time of leaving. It was only after we left that Pharaoh realized how much he lost. He'd been so stubborn about not letting us go that we had 10 different plagues, and he finally chased us out. But in retrospect, now that we've left, and he realizes he was lost. Between the 10 plagues, between the fact that we're leaving with all the gold and silver of Egypt, and not only that, but of course all the contributions that the Jewish people had made to the civilization of that time, what's going to happen? I mean, Egypt was a war zone. It was a disaster. There was nothing left to survive on. The kingdom had completely collapsed. This had been the mightiest world power at the time. Not, there was no equal. Totally the world power of the time, and they have been decimated, completely decimated. When we go to leave Egypt, Hashem led the Bnei Yisrael in a roundabout fashion towards Israel. There's a straight path, but if we were going to go a straight path, that straight path would lead us potentially right into a war zone area where we'd have to fight with the locals, because they're looking at us as coming in to conquer the land. And of course, we're coming in a few million strong, because this is 600,000 men of military age. So you add the 600,000 men, you add older men, and you add boys, and you add all the ladies and all the female, the women, all those together. It's a few million strong that were leaving Egypt and following God out into the desert, which is an amazing thing to think about, And King David, spoke to God in the sense of talking about, the trust. God says that the trust that you put in me in your youth, meaning when we were a young nation and we followed God out into the desert. That's amazing. A couple million strong with their supervisions going out, just following God into the desert. That's an amazing trust that we have. So God led us around in a circuitous route, because he didn't want us to get frightened off so quickly by an early battle. So a straight road would have gone straight into the land of the Philistines. It would have been a disaster. In fact, 40 years prior to the Exodus of Egypt, there was a portion of the tribe of Ephraim that They felt it was time to go. They wanted to go. They packed up and they left Egypt. They actually escaped Egypt, and they were killed. They were killed by the Philistines because it wasn't time. They didn't have God's blessings and power behind them. So it was certainly going to be a challenge. That God led us through more of a roundabout, circuitous route to go to Him. Interestingly enough, God is taking us out of slavery, and we are indebted to God. And usually, when you think about what we owe to God, we ought to be doing things for God, right? But what happens here? It's almost as if God becomes our servant. The things that God does for us here is phenomenal. The way He serves us, He didn't treat us like slaves. We're switching our slavery from being slaves to Pharaoh, and we're going to serve God. The whole point is to go to serve God on the mountain, on Mount Sinai, receive the Ten Commandments, receive the Torah, become a nation. That's our goal, is to go become servants of God. And instead of us being servants to God, what happens here is that God takes care of us. There's a pillar of fire that leads ahead of us during the nighttime, a pillar of cloud that leads us during the day. So he's lighting the way for us. He's guiding the way for us. The miracles that happen in our journey here. God protected us with the clouds of glory from the desert sun. He smoothed out the way. So the valleys were filled in, the mountains were flattened. God flattened the journey so we should have a smooth journey for us. Protected us in the desert from scorpions and all the desert things like that. He fed us with the water from the rock of Miriam and also from the man that fell every day. So God's taking care of us this whole time. It's an amazing thing. Here we are, servants to God, and He's doing all the service, right? One of the other things that's interesting to note about our time in the desert, the 40 years in the desert, that we're starting this journey now, is that miraculously, our clothes, they grew on us and they stayed, talk about permafresh, they stayed clean, right? It's almost like a turtle with its shell, right? Our clothes became a part of us, and God took care of the sizing and the cleaning on a regular basis. So we've left Egypt. We're starting our journey. We originally told Pharaoh we were going to do a 3-day journey into the wilderness to serve God, and he sent with him guards to check on us, to watch. He sent with us, and 3 days into the journey, we haven't stopped and turned around, and so word gets back to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is now hardens his heart again, and he is incensed that we're not doing what we said, in the sense that he, that what he feels we're going to be doing here. And he turns to his people and he says, this is a personal thing. Their God is taking care of them, and I am the God of Egypt, he says. This is my battle. Come join me. I'm going to do this personally. And he tells the Egyptians he's gonna lead the battle. He's going to be leading this pursuit. So the Pharaoh at this time gathers up all that they have left. Now you may wonder, where did they get horses? If we've already been through the plague of the animals and we've been through all these different plagues, right? Where did they have horses to saddle up for their chariots? And the answer is that the Egyptians, the Mitzrayim, who believed in Moses and who believed in the Jewish God after all these plagues were going on, when the warning came about the upcoming Makkah plague of the death of the animals, they took their animals inside into the barn and into their homes. They took them inside to protect them. And so those who feared God to some degree, a little bit, took their animals inside. And so those horses were still available back at that time. And Pharaoh says we're going to go attack them. We're going to kill them, and we're going to take all the riches back, all the gold and silver we're going to take back. And instead of, like most kings, who takes the bounty for himself, Pharaoh says that I'm going to split the bounty with you. So now he's got riled up a whole army to come out and chase after us. So just as there were 10 plagues in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, when we get to the sea, there's going to be another 10 plagues that happen here. And in fact, in the Haggadah, it's a very interesting part of the Haggadah. The Haggadah makes a story about in Egypt, the plagues were called the finger of God. What happened at the sea, at the splitting of the sea, is called the hand of God. So some of the sages talk about, so as it means it's one plague equals, it's 10 plagues times 5, so it's 50, or is each plague, I mean, they do the math in different ways, but clearly, the miracles at the sea were even greater than the plagues that had happened in Egypt itself. So we're going to talk about, they start their journey. They start their journey, and the Egyptians start to chase after them. And as they come to the sea, so they become trapped. The sea is ahead of them, and the Egyptians are coming from behind them. Wild animals on both sides, the desert animals. And at this point, the Jews who have neglected their prayers, so Hashem caused us to cry out. In other words, God caused a situation where we should cry out to God. So Dasan and Aviram, those are the two complainers we've had historically. They start complaining that it would have been better had we died back in Egypt. One group says, let's throw ourselves into the sea rather than return to slavery. A second group says, let's return as slaves, but at least let's stay alive. Right? A third group says, let's fight them, which is suicidal. And then a fourth group says, let's run through them and confuse them. And to all of these machinations, Moses says, you stay quiet, God will perform miracles for you. You stay quiet. And as you've seen Egypt today, you'll never see it again. This is the end. God's going to take care of everything. So God commanded to travel on. That was the point. Travel on. You're not going to see Egyptians anymore. Travel on. So as we start to travel on, there's this sea in front. What are you going to do, right? So Nachshon ben Aminadav is one of the from the tribe of Judah, and when he heard the command is go. So commander says go, you go, right? Mm-hmm. There's sea in front of us. We would drown. I don't know how to swim. The commander says go, go, and so Moses says go, and so therefore that's exactly what happened here. Nachshon ben Aminadav, he went in, he was ankle deep in the water, he was knee deep in the water, he was waist deep in the water, he was armpit deep in the water, and as the wave was about to crash over his head, that's when it splits. That's when it splits. And that again comes back to teach us that we have to do what we're told. If God tells us, he gives us a man to go, go. Don't make your own, trying to figure out how to do this in a smarter way. Do what God says, and God will take care of the rest of it. So Nachshon ben Aminadav, he's the one who goes, and that's when everything splits. That's when the miracle starts to begin here. There are some miracles that happen at the same moment the sea splits, okay? It didn't happen just here at the Reed Sea where the Jews are gathered and the Egyptians are chasing us. The message teaches us that the world knew what was happening because every body of water in the world split. Every body of water split in that moment to publicize the miracles that were happening for the Jewish people through the Jewish God. Water split. Unlike Hollywood presentations, the water split like a tunnel. So there were two sides and a roof overhead, and the walls became solid. And there was one tunnel for each of the 12 tribes. Miraculously, the ground underneath our feet turned solid, dry, solid ground, so that we could travel with ease on a nice solid highway. When the Mitzrim, the Egyptians, would chase after us, that dry, solid ground would turn to clay, and it would be a possible journey for the Egyptians. They would become trapped within it. The water that created the walls around us hardened with the wind, and they solidified into a decorative formation. And not only were they a decorative formation, the walls, but they were also clear, as water is. They were clear, and you could see through, so that each tribe could see the other tribes also successfully getting out. And during their journey through the sea, anyone who got thirsty would take a cup, stick it through the wall. The wall was solid, right? But they could stick it through the wall and pull it back, and there was water to drink. And then the wall would solidify afterwards. So there were numerous miracles that came forth there at the sea in honor of the Jewish people. As we finished in the sea, as we're coming out of the sea, the Egyptians are coming in. Mm-hmm. It would be mortifying to think that we're still being chased. And what happens now is one of the great Chazei Hashem, the kindness of Hashem, that in order for us not to be fearful of ongoing reprisals, so what happens is that God collapses all of these walls in on the Egyptians, and they were punished mida keneged mida, measure for measure. The Jews, the Egyptians who were mean to the Jews, but not as mean as others, shall we say the nicest of our taskmasters, they died quickly. But the ones who had made us suffer with glee, those who got into their job as taskmasters, so they suffered the worst. As Rashi talks about, they crashed down and then lifted them up, and then crashed them down again, and lifted them up and crashed them down. And the whole time, the horse and rider stayed together as they were being thrashed down into the sea. And so, mida keneged mida, for each of the way they treated us, this is how they received their punishment at the sea. And finally, Chazei Hashem and the kindness of Hashem, their bodies all washed up on the shore. So the Jewish people could rest assured that this is over. This is finally over. The Egyptian taskmasters are dead. They're not going to be chasing up after us and any longer. This is done. Interestingly enough, the measure says that the gold and silver that was on their armaments, on their chariots and on their horses and on their armor that they were wearing, there was more gold and silver there than the Jews had originally borrowed from our neighbors as we were leaving Egypt. And so they gathered even more gold and silver from the chariots than they had previously. Of all of the open miracles that have just happened, it has been so amazing and so phenomenal that Moses is inspired to sing praises of God, to sing out and rejoice in all the great good that God has done for us. And miraculously, as he began to sing, all the men sang with him, and Miriam and the women sang as well. And they all sang prophetically the prayer, Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael Es Hashira Hazais. It's printed in the Torah, the song that they sang, in praise of all the amazing miracles that God has done for us. It's just an absolutely stunning and amazing thing that's happened here. This Parsha Beshalach continues in our journey, and I'll cover a couple of the specific topics here in the Parsha that are related to the Passover story. Is that as we leave Egypt, God provides for us after the matzah that we took out has disappeared. God provides for us in the wilderness with the man. The man is the heavenly bread. The heavenly bread, every morning, the heavenly bread would fall. There would be a layer of dew, the heavenly bread, and then another layer of dew on top of that to keep it fresh. And our commandment from God was to go out each morning and collect the man to prepare for our meals. And interestingly, again, mida keneged mida, measure for measure, the holier the person was, the easier it was to gather the man. You know, if you those who were tzaddikim, the most righteous, they could just step outside the tent, collect the man for the day, and they were done. The less righteous had to go out further out of the campgrounds to get it. And on itself was an amazing, amazing food. The man, whatever we gathered, it was exactly the necessary amount for the day. If you gathered more, like Dasan and Aviram, they gathered more and it turned putrid by overnight. It didn't last. But if you gathered too much, by the time you got home, it was the exact amount. If you didn't gather enough, and didn't gather enough, by the time you got home, it was there. It was all there for you, right? Imagine your imagination dream of. Whatever you wanted to have, that's exactly what it tasted like. And miraculously, a bit disturbing to mothers, but miraculously, the food was a complete spiritual food. So the whole time we were eating the man, there was no leftover from the digestive processes. You know, mothers get nervous when there's no diapers to change and things like that, right? But it was a perfect nourishment. And there was something left from it. There was no well, except the energy that we had. It was a miraculous food. God told us that on Friday we should gather a double portion because the man will not fall on Shabbos. On Friday, contrary to the rest of the days of the week, Friday gather a double portion, and with that double portion you'll have also for Shabbos as well. When we celebrate Shabbos, you often notice there'll be a challah board, then there'll be the challah, and then there's a cover over the challah board. There was a layer of dew. There was another cover over the man as well. Also, in Jewish law, on Shabbos, we have two challahs at the table, two whole challahs at the table, because we gathered two portions on Friday, one for Shabbos. Again, the challah reminds us of God's great kindness for us in the midbar, in the desert. During our journeys, we ran out of the water that we'd taken as well, and the Jewish people complained. And I don't want to get into the complaining. We have enough complaining as it is. But there's 10 different times in the desert the Jews complain to God, and 10 different times God responds. But he responds according to the complaint. The fact that they complained they didn't have food, they have to have food, and God has to provide food. There's a certain legitimacy to the complaint, but they didn't complain when they were hungry. They complained when they ran out of food. They complained while their bellies were still full. They complained that they didn't have food. And part of that, the man, is for this purpose, is to remind us and to teach us have faith. Nowadays, we don't have man, but we do, because God provides for us. Nowadays, God provides for us through the instrument of the job that we take. But either way, God's going to provide, whether it's coming from heaven or whether it's coming through natural means, God is going to provide for us. Don't complain today because you don't have for tomorrow. You have for today. Don't complain. You need God's blessings for tomorrow. Ask for God's blessings for tomorrow, but don't complain that you're hungry when you're already satiated and you're worried about tomorrow. I remember a time. I won't go into too many details, but I remember a time when finances were tight before a particular event, and I realized a week before the event, it was a personal family event. Realized a week before the event that everything was covered. All the necessary finances were covered. And as soon as I realized that, my mind said, yeah, but what about the next one? And I'm thinking, that's the Yetzer Hara. That's the evil inclination. That's the part of me that's already worried about the next thing. When stop and celebrate what we have today. Be grateful and appreciate all that we have in the moment. God will take care of the future as well. And that was the purpose of the man in the desert, is to remind us, stay present in a moment. You're truly blessed. Count your blessings and stop worrying about the future. And prepare, but not to worry about the future. God will be there as well. And then God provided the rock. God told Moses to speak to the rock, and out would come the water. And the water that came out from the well was in the merit of Moshe's sister Miriam. And that water that came out from the well split into 12 different streams. And that separated the 12 tribes in their encampments as the Tzivos Hashem, the armies of God, traveled through the desert. Wherever they traveled, the rock rolled with them. And wherever they stopped, it spout forth. It created 12 different streams of water. And that split up the camp. Every Shevet, every tribe, every division of the 12 tribes of Israel would have a stream of their own to provide water straight to where their encampment is. So these are some of the tremendous miracles that happened during our initial journey out of Israel, out of Egypt, on our journey towards receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai and then going to the holy promised land. At the end of this parsha, there's an interesting transition stage. God has provided for us. God destroyed the great Egyptian nation and armies and with the plagues and everything else. He brought the most powerful country of the world to its feet. All that for us. We did the commandment of the Paschal Lamb. We smeared the blood on the doorpost. We ate it with matzah. So we did some mitzvahs, but mostly God's doing everything for us. Do nothing nation called Amalek attack us. Joshua, gather together yourself for an army and go out and do battle. We have to go out and do battle. This we have to do ourselves. It's time for us to take up arms for ourselves and go to battle. But these are people that have been slaves for 200 years. They're not used to being warriors. And all of a sudden, now we have to take up arms. We're not trained soldiers. So Moses stands on a nearby hill and he lifts up his hands to God in prayer. And as the Jews people see Moses praying and his hands up to God, they also think about God and how God will help them. And they're successful in battle. They have to battle. They have to do the work, right? They go to battle, but they're successful in the battle because they're remembering that help comes from on high. Help comes from God. And Moses, standing there in prayer, helps remind them that our help comes from on high. And as long as we continue to remember that our help comes from God, then God blesses us in all of our endeavors. And this part of our Parshas Beshalach, this wraps up the special series we have on preparing for Passover and the Passover story through the use of the Parshas. It's always important to remember the big picture. Sometimes we get so caught up in our current travails that we lose sight of the big picture. And this story reminds us, it begins with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's a promise that God makes to Abraham that his children will be foreigners in a strange land. They will be enslaved for 400 years, and they will come out Baruch Gadol with great wealth. They will go to Mount Sinai. They will receive the Torah. Then they will go to the Holy Land, and they will go into Israel, the land of milk and honey promised by God to Abraham. This is all one big journey. Bigger picture. And in the bigger picture, we get through all of the smaller journeys. But keep that in mind. So every time we celebrate Passover, we have to remember the big picture that all of this is a part of. That God takes us, creates from Abraham a family. From a family, we become a nation. We receive the Torah at Mount Sinai. We have a divine mission, and our divine mission takes us to Israel to build a holy land with a holy people and a holy land with a holy Torah. And that's God's divine mission for us on earth to be a light unto the nations and about the time of great peace. And that concludes our series.